Welcome to being a seeker, Michelle.
I think so. That rings a bell. That clicks with me. I'm definitely seeking, and I do actually feel that's what's been kind of pointed out to me during this, chapter of my life, and that feeling of overwhelming feeling of shame that I got really led me to your book and really led me to this self-discovery that I'm so thankful for.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 592. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad you're here because we have a coaching episode. I haven't done one of these in years and they're back. So before I forget, if you want to apply to be coached on the podcast, head on over to the show notes where that link is, or you can go to andreaowen.com/podcast-coaching. Podcast-coaching, and there's an application on there and you can read a little bit more about it. Today, we have a woman named Michelle who wanted just some general coaching. I'm gonna let the episode speak for itself, where we kind of get into it and she explains what it is that she was looking for. This is a slightly different take, if you will. It's not a typical coaching session. Those will come up. I have a couple more of those coming up throughout the spring and into the summer. But this one is a little bit different. It's more, I'm guiding a little bit more than I typically do in a traditional coaching session. But nonetheless, I think it will be helpful for you. And it's coming up here in just a second. But before I do that, registration is opening soon for Write Your Way Through It. If you are somebody who wants to integrate, you're ready to integrate the work, you're ready to come into community with other like-minded women, you're ready to get on some Zoom calls with me and these women and possibly have some laser coaching if you're feeling up for it, I am going to be not only guiding you, but giving you lots and lots of journaling prompts, writing prompts, so that you can write your way through it. Whether you're going through a challenging time right now or not, whether you really want to integrate a lot of the work that you hear about here on the podcast, might be something in particular. It might be something just general. If you have something just general, I guarantee you, once you're in that group, some specific things are going to come up that you're going to want to write about. And I do believe that when you give people the opportunity to be creative, you're giving them the dignity and the opportunity to grow and to thrive and to transform and to develop into the person that they want to be, the next chapter of their life. So it's about tapping into your inner wisdom. It's about just really slowing down for a moment to integrate the work. I'm so dang excited. I'm excited to also do the work with you. Of course, my first priority is guiding you, but during these calls, I'm going to be doing some of my own writing and there'll be opportunity for sharing. I'm so excited. AndreaOwen.com/program. And the info page is there. I'm probably going to let people come in a little bit late, even when we already get started, because there's no actual curriculum where you'll feel behind. So if you're listening to this a little bit later, head on over there. And if you're listening to it in the future, there's probably a sign up page for you to be notified when I do this again, probably in 2025. All right, AndreaOwen.com/program. Without further ado, let's get into it. And also, there at the very end, I'm going to give you a short update because I emailed Michelle and asked her how it's going. So again, without further ado, here is the coaching session with Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited because no pressure or anything, but this is the first time I've had someone on for coaching in a long time. So thank you for being vulnerable. And it's really in service of everyone listening. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so why don't we start by can you introduce yourself and tell everyone maybe like where you're from and a little bit about, just who you are in general?
Yeah, so my name's Michelle Hall and I live in Washington State. Right now it's really warm, above average, so that's been nice.
Oh, nice. We're recording this at the end of January, so I'm assuming usually it's rainy and gross.
Yeah, it's about 20 degrees higher than it's supposed to be, so that's really nice.
Nice.
And I just work full time Monday through Friday in a small office, family owned and ran. And I do front desk work. Well, I do a lot more than that, but
Hmm.
front desk, I answer phones,
The daily grind.
do billing, all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you filled out what I have people do when they want to be on the show is they fill out an application and you had, several things that you kind of wanted to work on and they were sort of broad and you and I had a quick get to know each other call to kind of narrow it down. So can you kind of explain and feel free to be as specific as you want, like what do you find challenging right now that you would like coaching on? And then also where do you want clarity or like what would you like to walk away with at the end of our call today?
Well, so I am doing this whole like discovering myself, going through, just trying to take a look at my life and see what I want to do better. And I kind of found that I was living in shame.
Hmm.
I had a moment where I was just really down, and I read your book, and there was a paragraph in there that said exactly how I was feeling. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I deal with shame. I carry that shame, and I have for a long time. So realizing that, I knew I had to take a look at it. And I guess I just kind of want to see the whole process. They tell me that I have to feel my feelings.
Hmm.
But then what do we do? Where do we go from there? When I feel it, what's next? How do I go through that process of really,
Hmm.
you know, figuring out what to do and really tackling that issue of me carrying shame?
Yeah. So is it fair to say that you're sort of looking for help on what does the work look like in your life? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, yeah. Like, so, yeah, pretty much. If
Okay.
I feel shame, what do I do next? Do I validate it? Do I journal about it and that type of thing? And then also, when are you supposed to analyze it versus feeling it?
Okay. Think about it and identify it versus actually feeling it and processing it.
Right.
Okay. If you remember, would you mind sort of paraphrasing that excerpt that you read about shame that resonated with you so much for people that maybe have never read the book or forgot that part?
Yeah. It was
How to stop feeling like shit?
Renee. Yeah. It's how, yeah, yeah. And it was basically how to get the most out of the book.
Yeah.
Gave me a lot of insight just from the very beginning. But it was Brene Brown describes shame, the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection.
Hmm. And I said that's a very clinical definition. Didn't I say that? And
Yeah.
I explain it differently.
It is, but it made a lot of sense to me when I read it because I was feeling that in the moment.
Okay.
And I think I've always kind of felt a little less than, not worthy of belonging, maybe a little
Hmm.
low self esteem in that area.
Okay. So would you be open enough to give us an example of, you can, use different names or sort of like change places and events to give us an example of where that shows up in your life. Maybe it's something that's happened at work or maybe something relationship or even something as a child where you really felt that and felt that it held you back or caused you to behave or think a certain way that you don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with being raised Catholic. I
Okay.
think there was a lot of shame and guilt instilled in me at a very young age. And so it was kind of like I didn't feel like I did enough in my life that was good.
Hmm.
And, well, God loved me type of thing. I was going through YouTube channels and something triggered me, and I just went down this path. And I've done this in the past too, where I'll have like kind of scary thoughts, obsessive thoughts. And I realized I was kind of probably doing that because I didn't want to face the real issues that were happening. So it just kind of comes out at different times in my life where I just don't really feel good at where I'm at. Or maybe I'm in a behavior that I don't, that doesn't really jive with what I know is correct or right.
Hmm.
that's kind of when it shows up, is when I don't feel aligned in my life.
That's exactly the word I was thinking. Like it feels like you're out of alignment. So is it fair to say sometimes you might say yes to things that you don't want to, or no to things that you would rather say yes to just because of old thought patterns of like what it means to quote unquote be good?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I would say so.
Okay. Let's start there because that part jumped out at me when you said you didn't feel like you did enough that was good.
Mhm.
So, what were your expectations? Like, what did you make up it would be for a girl or a woman to be good?
Well, I think just with my upbringing, it's just, following the rules or of the church. And I'm not really a religious person right now, but like I said, I think this is just all things that have, been instilled in me from a very young age. And I guess I just don't feel like at 47, I'm the adult that I need to be, or I don't really see my life where I thought it would be at this time. And I mean, it's not so much to be good. It's just like all the little things I've done in my past. Like if I've
Mm,
drank too much, or if I've had relations outside of marriage, or,
hmm
any of those type of things. And I also think I struggle with perfectionism too, because I feel like it didn't matter what I did, whether it's this little thing or this big thing, it just wasn't enough. And in that paragraph, it says, we don't feel like we belong,
Yeah.
or good enough to belong. And I just feel like I'm just not good enough. I'm not good enough.
hmm
And I'm never going to make it to where I need to go,
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah. Here's what I'm thinking, and I'm going to be super, super transparent for both you and the listener. Because we only have a short amount of time together, I think it would be the most helpful if I sort of walked you through a couple of things. First is really the steps of shame resilience. And that's what I briefly talk about in that particular book, but it's something that I do on a sort of higher level through a group program called the Daring Way. But I'm happy to take you through kind of like a crash course of what it looks like. So, and people listening can take notes and you'll have it recorded so that you can unpack it on your own and maybe see in your own life where you can practice it so that hopefully you can work on it. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
That's the first thing. And I also don't want to step over what you had asked for in terms of what does it look like to actually like feel your feelings versus intellectualizing them and like what shame has to do with all of that. So we'll do that part. We'll do this in kind of like two parts. Does that sound good?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Sounds great.
So usually coaching is I ask a lot of questions, you have a lot of answers, and then we kind of like create assignments around it. This one's going to look a little bit different. And then I'm going to be kind of, I hate this word, but it's a little bit of lecturing.
I could use it, I'm sure.
Okay. And so the steps of shame resilience, excuse me, I get excited when I talk about this. So it looks like it's a few different things. And so the first one is you have to recognize when it's happening in your life. That is very first. I talk about this all the time. You got to name it to tame it, if you will. And it looks like you're already there, which is the really exciting news. Many times that is half of the journey is the self-awareness piece and also just like noticing when you're in it. And so in the broader version of this program that I teach is I ask the participants to get really intimate about what are your physical symptoms. So can you think of a time where you have either felt shame or been shamed by someone else, whether it was on purpose or on accident? Can you think of a time? You don't have to tell us the exact scenario, but can you think of a time?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I can.
So can you remember what happens to your body during those moments, like the physical sensations?
Yes, I do. Very much so.
What happens?
So, I mean, I'll feel just like this knot in my stomach. It can even cause me to get, nauseous, just a lot of guilt, and it settles right in my tummy. If it happens to me like in the moment from someone else, I'll probably feel it more in my face, like more of a hot flush.
hmm
But it's really it's like this knot in my stomach
Yeah.
is where I feel
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Not good. I'm not glad that it happens to you, but I'm glad that you recognize the physical symptoms. Brene calls shame a full contact emotion because it is physical. And really, what the purpose of shame is, and theories are that It's a way to control people. It's used in religion quite a bit. And sadly, it's also used in parenting, I think less now than it used to be. But I think, especially our parents' generation, a lot of them just raised on shame, and it can change behavior on a dime, changes behavior. However, it's extremely detrimental for people's self-worth, their self-esteem, their self-confidence, et cetera, et cetera. So kudos that you know your physical symptoms. And the reason that I want you to be intimate with that is so that you can recognize it very quickly when it happens in your life.
Right. Yes.
When it happens in your day-to-day. Okay. So you're like, oh, that's shame happening. And so then we move into, once you realize that you're in it, it can be very helpful to know why you're in it. And that's when I believe it's one of the later chapters in How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, where I talk about identities and unwanted identities and triggers. Do you remember that at all?
Yes, I do.
Pop quiz, Michelle. That's that whole thing. And so the 2-minute version is, if you have time, everybody, go find it at How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. It's the ideal and unwanted identities. And it's basically really understanding how you would never want to be perceived by other people. So if I had to guess, for sake of time for you, you would never want to be seen as promiscuous. You would never want to be seen as like party girl, just like based on what you shared before. Probably, at work, you have a list of unwanted identities. You don't want to be perceived as unorganized, unprofessional. These are just kind of the generic ones. People tend to have very specific ones. We also have our ideal identities as well. And when we know those, it also becomes easier for us to know when we're triggered. So say we get into an argument with our significant other and they say something like, about to start your period, you seem really emotional. And that might trigger us because we don't want to be seen as stereotypical hysterical.
That is one of mine for sure.
Is it? Okay. Well,
yeah.
I'm reading the room. Normally in a coaching session, I would coach you through and you would name them. But again, for sake of time, I'm just kind of giving you some quick examples. So again, it starts out as knowing your physical symptoms that you're in it, and then also why you're in it. So knowing what your triggers are. And then we move into self-kindness and self-compassion. And I'm curious for you, what is your relationship with self-compassion and being kind to yourself?
I'm working on it. It's definitely getting better, but I did realize that I was very negative to myself.
Okay.
I've been really trying to listen to my inner critic. Yeah, I've been very negative to myself throughout my whole life, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to just acknowledge that point that you're in too, because that can be really hard I call it the ultimate ass kicker, like when we beat ourselves up for beating ourselves up, because some people do that. I'm not saying that you are. Are you a little bit?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You're like, oh my God, I can't believe that my negative self-talk is this bad. I'm a mess, or, I have so much work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I invite people like in those moments to have grace for yourself. We all have negative self-talk, and just that point in your personal growth, the moment that the covers get ripped off and you realize maybe like how much shame you have, or you realize how much negative self-talk you have, which is directly related. You realize that you're engaging in numbing out or have religious trauma. It can be a pivotal place of grief. So again, my invitation for you is to try to give yourself as much grace as possible. It can be complicated in that space. And I'm glad that you're working on it. Do you have any specific exercises or mantras that you tell yourself? Like, what does the work look like for you thus far?
Well, I'm doing a lot of journaling.
Good.
And just really trying to analyze. Well, that's the thing, analyze what I'm feeling and where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And just basically a lot of journaling, a lot of thinking. And that's where I'm saying is I feel like I'm doing more analyzing than maybe feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to not do the work properly per se, so I can not do this again or be able to handle it if I do.
Yeah.
And anytime that I do catch myself, I'm getting better at catching myself talking negative. I will rephrase it and say, I am good enough. I do deserve this or whatever, because I do have a hard time seeing myself as anybody other than what I already have been.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really trying to open up and see that what is possible to me. And I'm doing a lot of that through journaling.
Okay, good. I'm a big fan of journaling, and I admittedly should do it more, but I usually tend to do it when I'm going through like big shifts. And so there's the self-compassion piece and also empathy. So if anyone's familiar with Brené's work, you probably heard her say, share your story with someone who's earned the right to hear it. Have you ever heard her say that?
Yeah. Yep. I have.
Okay, good. So what that means is, there's a whole module around building trust and what that looks like, and which can be complicated in its own. That's a whole nother conversation for another time. But the hope is ideally that you have someone in your life where you can come to them. And for some people, it's a therapist or a counselor where you come to them and you trust them enough to tell them about what has happened to you, whether it was a shaming moment that just happened or that happened in your childhood, or if it's more of a broad thing, like for you, Michelle, like your religious trauma, and talking to someone, not about just what happened, but about how it felt. Like, what was the experience like for you? And there's a difference between sharing that very differently. So do you have someone in your life?
I do have a therapist that I talk to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then my boyfriend, I can talk to him. So it's pretty much him and my therapist who I open up to. Yeah.
And the hope is, Brené says that the antidote for shame is empathy. And I talk about this, I believe it's in chapter 2 or 3 of How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, is being met hopefully by this person, I call them a compassionate witness, who can really just kind of hold space for you, as we say, in these rooms, instead of trying to fix it or be dismissive or tell you like, let's go kick their ass, they're the worst, or things like that. Usually therapists are pretty good at that. Sometimes our significant others or our friends need to have you preface the conversation by saying, "Hey, I'm about to share with something with you that's pretty heavy for me, and I would love it if you just listen and then give me a hug at the end."
Right.
So that's what that might look like.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Do you have a friend that you think meets you with empathy, or is that something you can work on?
I do. I do have friends I can work with, but they kind of live far from me. So it's not like real easy to like get an actual hug from them. But I do have some friends that I can talk to about, about it.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. To summarize again, it's knowing that you're in it, having that self-awareness and knowing why you're in it, and then the self-compassion and empathy. And then the last part is exactly what we're doing here. So it's called speaking shame. So that is where you are talking about shame in conversations as much as you can. I mean, it's not always socially acceptable to talk about shame like at work to your but, it's conversations where I use this as an example. So many times when we're describing something that happened to us that was a shaming moment where we felt shame, rarely do we ever say that we were ashamed. We usually say, I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
We replace it with that word. I think because it's interesting to me that we don't have a verb. It's a tricky way to say the word. I won't get into it because I've tried to play with it in sentences and it's awkward. And I don't know if it's just semantics and how we're not used to saying it. However, I honestly think it's because as a society and as a culture, we hate it so much that we don't even want it to be a part of our everyday vocabulary.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I tell the story in the book about how when we first moved to North Carolina, I was at a meeting in a conference room with my son was starting a brand new school. He was in first grade at the time and he is in special needs program. And so we were having what is it called? IEP meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I had just met these people. I knew zero people except our realtor in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I'm meeting with these women ahead of time and just chatting with them. And then we go into the meeting and they have his paperwork from his previous school. And it was from the psychologist that diagnosed him. And the very first paragraph, and the special ed teacher is reading aloud. And she says, it's just my son's name. He lives with his mother, father, and sister. And his mother has a history of substance abuse. And I'm just like, because it was in the health history. And I am someone just throat punched me. And I just met these people. I don't know anyone. So I instantly go into shame, just have the full physiological symptoms. I simultaneously wanted to run out of the room and also defend myself and make a joke about it because that's what I do. And when I was telling the story later, I was telling a friend that I was so embarrassed.
Right.
As one would, right? Like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing. Yeah. Like that they tell this thing about me, but really it was shame. It would have almost been odd for me to say it definitely would have changed the mood in the room if I would have said, I felt so ashamed in that moment.
Right.
People would kind of recoil. So I just want to point that out because it's part of the steps of shame resilience is actually naming it in your everyday language with people.
Right. And I find I'm doing that a little bit more too, like naming it. And when I read it, it was actually the first time I was able to put a name to what I was feeling. And that was very eye-opening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, that is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Is shame, and I've had it for so long. And then I too have special needs children. And there's a lot of shame there because they live with their dad. And the only reason why is they have a much better support system. So I carry a lot of shame that I'm not with them. I mean, not everybody. It's been kind of hard, when you're a mom and you don't have your children.
Yeah.
People don't understand why. Let's put it that way.
And there's circumstances that are, yes, a lot of times private. And yeah, I get it.
So there's a lot of shame there. So like that's what I'm trying to work through is okay, now I know I carry this shame. What do I do next? How do I just journal about it? Do I validate it? That
Process
type
it.
of
Yeah.
thing.
So the processing is, and what I just described is sort of the journey into actually processing it instead of shoving it down. Because normally what we do
Right.
is we shove it down. And that's what that entire book is about. All of those behaviors that I talk about are ways that we shove shame aside because it's too hard to have it out in the open. So what I just described to you are the steps of moving through it
Right.
instead of shoving it down. And I just want to make sure that this is abundantly clear. We can't ever avoid shame. The only people that don't experience shame are people who don't have the human capacity for connection and empathy. And it's a very, very small part of the population. And so I'm going to assume that everyone listening to this podcast, because you care about personal growth, like you have the capacity to feel shame and you will still continue to have it. The difference is that my hope and the work I do and our conversation right here is that you are better able to move through it, to process it.
Right.
So it gets almost like digested instead of just shoved down. Because here's what happens when you shove it down. It ends up manifesting as perfectionism, control, people pleasing, poor boundaries. Numbing out is a big one. I know you and I have talked about that.
Right.
Extreme negative self-talk, low self-confidence, low self-esteem, codependence a lot. It also is in direct correlation with addiction and many times homicidal violence, domestic violence. Like it's a spectrum and it can become pretty intense.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of how it processed. And I want to stop and pause for a second. Do you have any questions? Does that help? What are your takeaways?
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's what I'm really working on right now because I've just shoved it down. I've numbed it out my whole life and I've never really, felt it. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, good.
It's clicking. It's clicking.
Yeah. Tell me if you're unclear. Like at any point, tell me if you're unclear. And people listening to the show, DM me on Instagram. That's the fastest way to get to me and I'll clarify what I can. In terms of, like what does the work actually look like? How do you process it? When you journal, what are your takeaways? Like what does that kind of look like for you?
I just try I'll write down how I'm feeling or, depending if I'm free writing or I have a prompted journal. And now I'm starting to if I feel a feeling that's negative, I do analyze it. Like I'm asking where it's coming from. I ask what, where part of me is feeling that. I kind of try to talk myself through that feeling. And then I ask myself if I need anything from it. And if I need to, do I need anything from the shame anymore or can I let you go? And I'm finding that's helpful.
Yeah, what a great question to ask yourself. Yeah, you're coaching yourself basically.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing when I journal. I just feel like I might be missing a piece, after that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I just have to continue to just do that thing.
Yeah. Do you have any specific expectations that you think that you're not meeting in your own personal growth?
Well, I think part of it's perfectionism because when I saw what I'm doing, I want it all to be taken care of right now.
Yeah.
I want
Fix my life journal.
Yes. I want to be perfect. I want to be in more action than in thinking, which I find myself stuck in a lot of times. I'm doing a lot of the analyzing, but then the action to do the things that will make my life better, I tend to procrastinate with that. And a lot of times it's because it isn't perfect or I don't understand it all the way. So if I don't think I can do it. It's just not going to be helpful.
Did you get to chapter 15 and how to stop feeling like shit, the values chapter?
Not yet. No, I haven't.
That's your homework.
Okay.
And I would love an update in a few weeks that we can give to everybody and I can record at the end of this episode. And really how the book ends is I wanted to put values first in the book because I knew a lot of people probably wouldn't get to it, but my editor and I did decide to put it at the very end because it kind of wraps up the whole thing. And so I go through these 14 habits that are really rooted in shame. And then at the very end, it's like, okay, so now what? Like I've talked about the problem and there are a lot of tools in that book, but at the very end, one of my main points of the book is when we are engaging in the perfectionism, in the numbing out, in the overachieving, the blaming, all of these different habits, they are out of alignment, like you were mentioning in the beginning of our conversation, with the person that you want to be. I have not met a woman who is a part of this community, who listens to this show, who said, my values are control, numbing out, poor boundaries. And, like, no, it's not. It's usually things like creativity and courage and or faith and integrity and personal growth, like those types of things. And so what I ask people to do is create their own North Star, create, not just name their values, but what do they look like? So even just given that quick list that I gave you, do you have an idea of what your values might be? Like what's important about the way you live your life?
Well, I actually been taking a look at that, and honesty is a huge one for me. I can't stand it when people aren't honest, and that's the kind of person I want to be too. Just real and honest is probably a big one for me. And actually, it's kind of like I'm developing that right now. I'm in that process because a lot of the times when I was reading your book, I didn't know what these things meant to me. They were just things that people had said or whatever. Like in the past, if someone had said to me, "Oh, you're feeling shame," I would have been like, "Okay, and
Mm-hmm,
what does
mm-hmm.
that mean?" But
Yeah.
now I'm getting it a lot more. So yeah, honesty I know is a big one for me. But right now I am working on it and I'm just trying to figure out what things do mean to me. I remember when I was going through my issue with, oh my gosh, am I good enough for God? Am I doing the right thing? I was listening to one of your podcasts and you were talking to a comedian, I believe, and you guys said, oh, so when your therapist said, give it to God, and you guys are like, oh gosh. And that like stuck, kind of hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, are we even allowed to say like, give it to God? Like that's a bad thing. Afterwards, I sat down and I asked myself, what does it mean
Mm-hmm.
to me when someone says, give it to God, or when I say it?
Because it can be incredibly helpful and empowering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I realize it's letting go of the outcome. So a lot of what I'm doing now is really trying to figure out what things mean to me
Good.
and not just hear them and let them go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
So, but honestly is a big one.
To be clear, that was a therapist that said that to me when I was asking her about like a real mental health issue that I was having. And I'm like,
Right.
ma'am, I need medication.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't like it when people say that either. And I was just like, but just for the space I was in, I was kind of like a trigger. I felt something when you said
Yeah.
it. And so I sat down and I asked myself, what does it mean? So I'm doing a lot of that. But honesty, that type of thing.
What you're describing is more context. Like you need more context. And that's what I talk about in that chapter. And when you were describing honesty, you said something, and I can't remember what it was, but I wrote down the word. You didn't say this word, but I wrote down authenticity because that's what it sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
What I encourage people to do is you can also string words together that really define what that value means to you. So for you, it might be honesty slash authenticity slash good boundaries or something like that. And so
Right.
I say this in the book, just naming your values and being done with it is like naming your children and calling that parenting. Like that's not how that works. There's so much
Right.
more to it. And so what I invite people to do is really define on a day-to-day basis what honesty means to you. So would it be fair to say honesty is not just other people being honest to you, but you being honest with yourself, or is it something else?
I think it's both. But I mean, I think I expect that out of other people is honesty because I feel like I am, for the most part. I mean, we all lie, but I feel like I'm very honest. I say things how they are, and I just kind of want the same respect. And then just things in relationship when guys haven't been faithful or whatever, those type of things drive me insane.
People out there making mistakes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, oh my God, how could you do that to me?
Yeah. Can we make it mean something about us? Yes, that's another conversation for another time. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. You know when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone, a father daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who was graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, so Michelle, I'm going to put down that your homework is to finish chapter 15 and do the values assignment.
Okay.
And then I'll reach back into you. Is like 2 weeks about enough time?
That should be plenty.
Okay. Are you okay if we sort of shift gears and talk about what actually feeling your feelings looks like versus intellectualizing them?
Yes, please. That is a big one for me right now.
Well, tell me what your relationship is to expressing emotions, also known as emoting.
Well, I do express them. I wear my emotions on my sleeve.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean?
You know how I feel. You know, if I'm upset, you know it. If I'm happy, you know it. It's just whatever I'm feeling, you know it. I don't shove it in.
Okay. So you cry if you need to. You get angry if you need to.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. In the past, it would be a lot of numbing, though.
Okay. So when you express your emotions, especially like I never call them negative emotions, I call them, the harder emotions. So like anger, fear, sadness, grief. After you express those, do you feel better? Do you feel like you've kind of quote unquote completed the cycle? Do you feel incomplete? Where do you fall?
Well, I mean, I would say that I feel incomplete in the sense that maybe I didn't express myself correctly, or I was harsh when I did it. There's a lot of times I say things that probably were a little harsh, and then I'll criticize myself about it if I'm expressing, especially to my boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
He's who I'm around the most. So I'll say exactly how I feel, but a lot of times it might be heightened because he's so calm. So I feel bad about how I do it versus him because he's so calm and I'm so like, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
you make yourself wrong sometimes for the way that you express it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Do you feel that you clean up your messes if you make a mess with your words or actions?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I will apologize if I feel like I need to, if that's what you mean.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I will. I mean, I think so. Maybe not to the extent that I would like to, but I mean, I do apologize. I will self-analyze what happened. So I feel like I kind of clean it up, but
Okay.
I don't know if the shame of doing that goes all the way, away.
Right.
Maybe I haven't done that.
Which brings me back to exactly what I was about to remind you about. If and when you have those moments where you are expressing your feelings and maybe something comes out the wrong way because it's the heat of the moment, and you maybe, clean it up as best you can in an apology, amends, and then you still feel not great about it, this is where the self-compassion comes in.
Okay. And I guess self-compassion, that's like a little bit like, I guess I'm like, oh, what does that look like? Oh, it's okay. You're human.
Yeah. So it comes in, it's three parts. And so this is Kristen Neff's work. She's a researcher from University of Texas at Austin, I think. And she did years and years and years of research specifically around self-compassion. And she breaks it down to three parts. So the first part is self-kindness. So that is just literally how we speak to ourselves. And the hope is that we speak to ourselves as we would someone we love and care about.
Okay.
So if this was one of your children or your best friend or someone that you care about dearly, and they made an honest mistake, and you know that they're a good person and that they didn't mean it, and they are beating themselves up for making this mistake, what would you say to them?
I would tell them it's not that big of a deal. Everybody's makes mistakes. It's okay. Basically the same thing. Have self-compassion.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. You're a good person.
Still a good person. Yeah.
Yeah. All those things.
So that can feel like speaking a different language to yourself. If you
Mhm.
or someone else listening to this show right now is like, I can't even imagine speaking to myself like that. I've been at war with myself for decades. Take it slow. It takes a while. You're basically rewiring your brain. I have exercises on that, but self-kindness is the first part in regards to self-compassion. The second part is what she calls common humanity. And that's the understanding, acceptance, and knowledge that our stuff, I'm using a very broad term there, our stuff is just like everybody else's.
Yeah. Okay.
Because when we're in shame, it feels very lonely. We are different.
Mm-hmm.
We're othered, that we are unacceptable.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps us in shame.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was feeling when I was in that moment of deep shame, for sure.
So the term is common humanity. And then the third one is mindfulness. And that's just paying attention to when you are beating yourself up, paying attention to when you might be really needing to give yourself some grace. So that's it. Just being mindful, when you're in the need for some self-compassion.
Right. Do you think when you feel, you're feeling the emotions, and maybe I'm going back to this and maybe you kind of explained it, but when you feel your emotions, when is it okay to analyze it? I mean, should you do that? Should you feel it and then maybe journal and analyze? I mean, that's a proper thing because of that video I saw on your Instagram of like someone so self-aware that they analyze instead of feeling. And I just want to make sure I'm not doing that. Or if there's room for both,
I think what that was pointing to are the more severe cases. So the people who think that they're doing work, and I definitely think this is the first step. I'm not trying to blame and shame, point the finger to these people. So the people who think that they're making a lot of progress by just intellectualizing and thinking about their feelings instead of doing anything to express them. So these are the people that instead of really walking into the grief of a major breakup or divorce or losing a job or a loved one, they will drink their way through it.
Okay.
When I make that joke, it's really like the more severe cases. And please know that I know that because I have been there. Or just have the other side of that is just like no emotional regulation at all. So where, we fly off the handle and go into fits of rage because we aren't actually expressing them in a healthy way. That's another kind of the other side of the spectrum.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's never linear.
Right.
And it can be all over the place. And if anyone, is feeling like they need a book to read, you too, Michelle, the book Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, I think I've mentioned it several times on the podcast. There's two particular chapters where they talk specifically around feeling your feelings and emoting. And they talk about what they call completing the stress cycle.
Okay.
And emotions are part of that. And so the way they describe it in the book is when an animal, gets extremely scared or chased by a herd of wolves, but they don't die and they're not super injured, they go into like a shock, and then their entire body will tremble and almost like they're having a seizure, like they're convulsing. And then a few moments later, they'll get up and run off. And, biologically, it's their body's way. It's the nervous system. I don't know if it's like resetting. These women have PhDs. They explain it so much more, so much better than I am right now. But it's a way for their nervous system to complete the entire stress cycle.
Okay.
And what they talk about in this book is that oftentimes we don't do this.
Oh, okay.
So some of the suggestions that they make are exercising is a huge one.
Okay.
Moving your body. So this does not necessarily have to be, an insanity workout, which it might be for you. I know I did that a lot when I was in my 30s, but now my 48-year-old body is like, no, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like a long hike. It might be, ecstatic dance. Like I close the doors. I don't want anybody to see me, and just put the headphones on and just move your body however you want. And really it's about allowing your nervous system to go through whatever movement it needs to do in order to complete the cycle.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. I like that. I think I'm going to incorporate that.
Yeah.
For sure.
What do you think you're going to do? Do you like to dance or paint erratically?
I've done that in my past.
Okay.
No, I'm not very creative. I wish I was. Just like walking and hiking, I like that. And I used to do that too, where I would close the windows and put on music and dance. So that I might need to do that again, because it does really cheer me up quite a bit. And it does release those pent up feelings for sure. So I used to have a job that was 100% physical. And now this job, I sit at a desk. So I haven't exercised in a long time. So I'm pretty sure that's probably something I'm missing.
Oh, babe. 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Probably a big one that I'm missing. That seems so simple.
It seems so simple, but yet in today's world, it can be challenging. And, I tell all my clients this, like, if it's not on your calendar, it's probably not going to get done. Like, you have a million things to do. So put it in your calendar. Will you commit to doing that as well?
Yeah, I will. Absolutely.
Just some kind of movement.
Yeah, I will do that.
I know
I've been needing to.
Okay. Yeah, I know. That's it. If we had more time, we could dive into that. But I've had several clients over the years who have told me stories where they did some kind of workout, whether it was like rock climbing. I had a client that went to Orange Theory or something like that and would cry afterwards during certain times in their life. And that's normal when your body is going through something.
Yeah, I've done that where I've cried and have no idea why. But that could be just
it's your nervous system.
PMS too. Yeah.
It's your nervous system. Yeah, it really is. So does that help in terms of, intellectualizing your feelings versus actually feeling them?
Yeah, it does. Especially when you made the comparison of people really not doing anything about it. That I think that's where I was getting a little tripped up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I need to it's okay to analyze it, but I do need to feel it. And then I need to complete the cycle, like you said. So I might have to sit down and write about that to really let it sink in and see what it means to me, and just analyze it or whatever.
Yeah, think about it.
I guess. But yeah, that makes sense. It does. Yeah.
Okay.
100.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of writing, and I think it can be incredibly helpful. And journaling, like right now, journaling for me just means like 1 or 2 sentences a day, and that's enough. I'm so thankful. I know I was one that did a lot of talking today, which usually doesn't happen in a coaching session, in a kind of a traditional coaching session. So I appreciate you being flexible with me as I went into more of a teaching mode. And I just want to say, you're doing everything right for you. You really are. I hope that you can acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I think I kind of wanted to get a little validation that I was headed in the right direction.
Yeah, you are.
And doing the right things. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, I think everyone that listens to this show, and especially people who are vulnerable enough to fill out an application to come on here and be recorded with their stuff, like you are definitely, I don't love the word chosen because then it makes it out that other people aren't, but I think that you have been sort of quote unquote selected by God, the universe, guides and angels, whoever it is, to walk this earth at this particular time as what I like to call a seeker. And so you are seeking something different for yourself. And there is a truck backing into my driveway right now that definitely is wanting us to point in that direction and emphasize that. So, welcome to being a seeker, Michelle.
Oh, yeah, I think so. That rings a bell. That clicks with me. I'm definitely seeking. And I do actually feel that's what's been kind of pointed out to me during this, chapter of my life. And that overwhelming feeling of shame that I got really led me to your book and really led me to this self-discovery that I'm so thankful for.
Yeah. Yeah. One more sort of resource I would love to point you to, and for anybody else listening who resonated with Michelle's, you just talked about it anecdotally about, growing up Catholic and the religious trauma. You may want to, have you heard of the term deconstruction?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't really know. I don't know if I've heard the meaning that you might be meaning.
I think sometimes it's a misconception around it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are completely turning your back against religion or anything specific. It's just, and there's a spectrum of it. There are some like pretty radical deconstruction people and a little bit more mild. And so it's a place for you to sort of unpack beliefs that were handed to you that you really didn't consent to, that have made a negative impact on your life. Because I do truly believe that for many people, their religion can impact them in such an amazing, positive way. So I don't ever want to walk away from a conversation with people feeling like that, isn't possible for them. But you are allowed to have a spiritual transition where maybe you kind of take what works for you and leave the rest.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you don't need the guilt and shame.
No, I don't want it. I don't want it. I've been doing it for too long. I realized I've been carrying it since I can remember, even looking back in my childhood I got in a little stealing phase when I was probably in second grade, and I felt so much guilt, and that I would wake up in the morning, or I would call my parents saying I didn't feel good because I couldn't live with myself because of those Catholic things. That's not right. That's right. And then the next day I returned everything that I could, but it's been with me for a long time. Yeah. Just anything like that.
Yeah, I feel like, and I grew up, I was baptized Catholic, was there for a few years, but I don't remember, but then grew up Lutheran, which is basically Catholic light, and very similar beliefs. And now I'm at the place where I believe that whatever God is out there, they do not want us to live our lives from a place of guilt and shame, especially when it comes to what they represent. And so anyway,
right.
That's my 2 cents about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so really all I have for you in terms of homework is to do the values exercise, chapter 15, of how to stop feeling like shit, and then also move your body.
Move my body. All right.
Move your body. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to say before we close up to feel complete, before I hit pause and then give an update?
No, I don't really think so. This has been very helpful, and I'm just going to continue on my journey and incorporate what you've said. And I feel pretty good. This is exciting for me. It's a little nerve-wracking. This journey is just exciting because I can't wait to see where I go with it. Yeah. And I think everybody should do it.
I agree. Everybody could use coaching. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here. And listeners, give me just 1 second. I'm going to come back with an update. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And I got an email from Michelle as I'm recording this. It's been a handful of weeks since we had that initial conversation. And here's what she said when I asked her for an update and if she had done the action steps that she had committed to. She said, yes, I did. And it's helping me navigate through my choices and decisions. Overall, I feel I have a clear direction and idea of where I'm going with the values I hold as my compass. And I feel I've been able to process my emotions more and move through them better now with the added physical exercise. When I need to process, walking has really helped with that. So that's awesome. I'm so glad for you, Michelle. And again, thank you for being vulnerable and coming on the show and showing us a little peek inside at what it's like to not only be kind of quasi-coached, if you will, but just be open to taking action on where you want to go. All right, everyone, I will see you next week. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I would be so incredibly grateful if you haven't done so already, if you could leave a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Super easy if you already listen to your shows over there. But if you don't, or maybe you have the app on your phone, but you listen to the show on a different app, if you could leave a review for this show, it matters so much. I wish I could express how much it matters. I also wish that it didn't matter so much, but alas, it does. So if you haven't already, please go review and rate the show. It would mean so much to me. And thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing day.
No one told us the truth about parenthood. Why? This is the podcast everyone needed before they had kids, because now that those little ones are here, there is a lot to unpack. I'm Rachel Shepardota, and I am your host for the podcast No One Told Us, where we tell the truth about parenting and let you in on all the stuff you really should have known about before having kids. I am the founder of Hey Sleepy Baby, but this podcast is so much more than sleep. We'll be diving into all the topics that you really care about and need to know while you do your best job raising those adorable tiny humans. Our goal is to just make you feel less alone and less overwhelmed. There are so many things that no one tells us before becoming a parent, and I think that we should really pull back the curtain on becoming a first-time or second-time mom or dad to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll have a little education, a little fun, and a whole lot of heart that goes into each and every episode. So join me and our amazing guests each week to hear us talk about what no one told us.